Welcome to AI in Learning, a series that unites today's most forward-thinking voices in learning and artificial intelligence. Together, we'll explore not just what's changing, but what it means for how people learn, grow, and stay relevant. Each conversation goes beyond the trends and buzzwords to understand real shifts that are happening in skills, tools, and mindsets that are shaping the future of learning at work.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Adobe's series on AI in learning, where we go beyond the trends of learning. And today we have a super special guest, Sal Khan. A quick introduction. Sal is the founder of Khan Academy, a nonprofit organization with the mission of providing free world-class education to anyone, anywhere. Khan Academy's content and mastery learning platform has more than 190 million registered users from around the world and has been translated into 50 languages. It partners with school districts to serve students who are historically under-resourced. A little bit more about Sal. Sal is the founder of Khan Lab School, a nonprofit laboratory school in Mountain View, California, a co-founder of Schoolhouse.World, a nonprofit that offers free tutoring over Zoom, and co-founder of Khan World School, a nonprofit online high school. And Sal holds 3 degrees from MIT and an MBA from Harvard. He's been profiled by 60 Minutes, and he was recognized as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. Welcome, Sal. It's great to be speaking with you again.
No, wonderful to be here, Kirti.
Thank you. Let's get started, Sal, and let's get started on a slightly different note. Certainly, AI holds a lot of transformative potential for all of us in our personal and professional aspects of lives. It's evident everywhere. It's everywhere in the news. It's evident in AI startup valuations. If I can say that. But to take a different, look at it, where, in your experience, has AI fallen short on the hype?
Oh, where has it fallen short? Well, I think it's just a matter of time. I believe that the hype will eventually pay off, although we know that sometimes the hype can get a little ahead of itself. So I don't think that tomorrow, an organization that isn't fully AI is somehow going to be disrupted or isn't going to be able to do what they want to do. Uh, but I do think if we think about over the next 5 to 10 years, all of that hype and probably more will happen. And it's very similar to what happened in the internet. I just think it's going to happen faster. And as we all remember, in the late 90s, we saw some of this, although at that time, it was $100 million company was a big deal. Now it's a $100 billion company. But we saw that, and we saw what happened to the bubble, and it popped, and everyone said, oh, look at this, it never turned into anything. Well, it did turn into something. It didn't happen in 1999 fully, but it did happen by 2009, 2019, 2025. I think what we're seeing in AI is going to happen that much faster. There are some really big questions about, are the people who are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars, collectively pouring in, say, $1 trillion into new model development, is that going to pay off? I don't know. I have no idea. But are we going to be able to take those models and apply them in our daily lives for learning, for productivity, for healthcare? I'm 100% sure that that's going to happen. I remember telling some of the AI researchers, this was 2-3 years ago, I was like, if you just froze for the next 5-10 years, we have enough to keep ourselves busy. We could do a lot with even what the frontier models were back then.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's a very sound perspective, Sal. Thank you. We'll come to Khan Academy. What you've developed as Khanmigo at Khan Academy is something that's goes beyond generating just fast. It's like a buddy to students, helping them learn. Uh, I'd be very interested to know how you went about developing that, and it's become a lot more pertinent now with MIT's very followed research on your brain on ChatGPT, where they are questioning the impact of uh, excessive use of LLMs. In this case, for writing an essay, but how do you take care of that cognitive debt not interfering with students' learning when they're using Khanmigo?
I view artificial intelligence the same way I will view intelligence. Absolutely, if you use AI, and the MIT study, which has gotten a lot of press, the one that showed the learners not learning is the one where they just use the AI to do everything. And if my kids came home and said, "Hey, Dad, here's my homework," and I said, "Oh, let me do it for you," they're not going to learn anything. So in some ways, it's common sense. I would say maybe the difference is that some of these tools, your Chat GPTs, your Geminis, you don't have to find an adult or an older sibling to do the work for you. It'll just do it. So maybe the activation energy, the threshold of being able to cheat is a lot lower. Our view, when we saw some of these first models, and this was months before ChatGPT came out, it was obvious it could be used for cheating, but it also had issues with math, had issues with hallucinations. We wondered, especially if you have younger kids on it, how do you moderate what they do? Make sure they don't get into unhealthy conversations. And so I pushed our team to say, look, let's turn those fears into features. Let's what would become Khanmigo. Let's not just give the answer. Let's act as an ethical tutor. Let's moderate the conversations. Let's give parents and teachers transparency what's going on. Let's make sure that we can reduce the math errors far more than just even the base models. We can anchor things on our content to reduce hallucinations. So that's the journey we've been going on. And I think on that first pass, we were just trying to say, look, how do we make AI that could be somehow part of this experience? We've learned a lot since then that if you just do that, it is useful for a good chunk of learners. And obviously, we made a lot of tools for teachers too to support them, lesson planning, progress reports, etc. But we realized that, once again, like a tutor, like a real tutor, like a human tutor, if I just showed up in your classroom and I said, "Hey, I'm a great tutor. I'm going to sit in the back of the room. Come ask me a question if you have one." Some kids will do it, but most won't. And that's kind of Khanmigo 1.0. And so what we're working on right now is how do you make the AI like a good tutor, like more proactive, um, acting as a concierge. A lot of folks know Khan Academy started back when I was a hedge fund analyst and I was tutoring cousins remotely. And in hindsight, a lot of what I did that I think made a big difference, yes, when they needed help factoring a polynomial, I would help explain that. But it was a lot of motivating them or calling them up or saying, "Hey, we've got to meet again. It's been 3 days," or calling their mom and saying, "Hey, Nashrat auntie, we can't, they can't miss our tutoring session." So I think that's the direction that the AI needs to go in, and it needs to be much more integrated in all of the workflows and the communication mechanisms that are happening both within the classroom between the teacher and the student and with the parent, and then also on the evaluative side. It's not enough just to get tutors, but how do you glean that information so that the parents, the teachers have better data so that they can act and they can move up the value chain and have better interventions with their students?
Wonderful. And it's such a fine line because the way we use AI at work is different from how students have to use it. So the other day, my son, 11-year-old, he had an assignment to create a brochure on Indian medieval history, right? And I asked him to use ChatGPT for research, but what he instead did was make me a brochure on Indian medieval history, right? And then ChatGPT just gave him, that fourfold layout and what should go where. So it's really you that short circuiting is just so intuitive to us as humans. We really need to watch out for that.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting there is on one level, what your son did is a very useful skill. Now at Khan Academy, if we needed to make a brochure on, I guess, medieval Indian history or anything, I would ask our team like, "Hey, you should have that first draft fairly quickly." And we do this we have to write a lot of philanthropic reports, reports to funders, things like that. The first draft you should get within minutes. But I think the next level skill, and it's great what your son did, but I think the next level that you push him on is like, okay, now edit that. What was good about the brochure? What was not? Can you fact check that brochure to make sure that all the visuals are correct, et cetera, et cetera? Can you make it even better? And I think that's going to be the skill that really matters. And to do that, you do need to know some of your content. You do need to know how to write well. You do have to have a sense of design. You do have to know how to validate information.
Exactly, exactly. Wonderful. Sal, coming to corporate learning now, the way we learn in companies, it seemed that it was at a point of disruption where it needed disruption, even before Gen AI came out, right? And there were some exciting things happening in the space of corporate learning. But for the most part, it has been this unidirectional course completion, module assignments, and certifications, right? Where do you think that is headed with Gen AI, the entire uh, area of how humans learn in corporate?
Yeah, I'm actually working on I can't give all the details yet, but I'll to give you the bones of something I'm working on. Um, we might be developing some type of, let's call it a new master's program that, the idea is, can you, create something that is high scale, so anyone who's capable of doing it will do it, low cost, so, not tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but maybe much lower, and aspirational that would actually directly tie to opportunities at the top firms, at your Adobes, your Googles, your Microsofts, your McKinseys, your Goldman Sachses. And some of the we've already started to pencil some of it together, and I kind of have been imagining, and we're starting. Actually, I'd love to talk to Adobe in more depth about this and see what would y'all would want. But I'm starting to talk to these employers and saying, okay, here's a draft. What would you add to that, or what would you take away? Because we want it to be really aligned to what is this? Let's call it generalist knowledge worker, especially like an entry level or mid level generalist knowledge worker. What's going to make them really valuable in the coming years? And I think there's about a third of that is just core content knowledge. And these are things like statistics, economics, accounting, finance, capital markets, some of the content that you might learn in a business program or an MBA type of program, but not just finish a module on Khan Academy. That would be part of it, but it would also certify your knowledge. We have another platform called schoolhouse.world where to certify your Khan Academy knowledge, you have to record yourself while you do the Khan Academy assessment, while you explain your reasoning out loud to make sure that you really understand what's going on and you can communicate it. And then that gets peer reviewed. And then you go off to tutor it. So in this quote new masters, in theory, not only would you learn the economics, but you would have to tutor the economics or the statistics. And that's where it starts to branch out a little further than what you just mentioned, because if you think about anyone who's successful as a leader or a manager in a corporate, they really are educators. They're helping mentor people. They have to learn how to communicate, make people feel comfortable. And all of that happens when you tutor content. And obviously to tutor it, you have to know the material at a very deep level. So that's a component we're going to be having. Another component is we have this program on schoolhouse.world called Dialogues. Right now, a lot of for high school students are participating, where we pair them with students who have opposite points of view on tough issues: affirmative action, Israel, Palestine, gun control, AI in society. We can keep going down the list. And the idea isn't to have a debate or to convince each other, but to listen to each other and have a constructive conversation and get feedback on that. And when I talk to employers, they're like, yes, we would like that too, because we know there's some very smart people who struggle with separating their identity from their position, or if the company has to go with a different decision, to kind of really get on board that decision and not be passive aggressive about it. So that's kind of one third. The other third is, yes, you should, and I think this part will change as we get more tools, but everyone should have at least some experience vibe coding an app. Someone should have some experience doing deep analysis of a series of companies or industries, maybe even modeling using these tools. Everyone should be building an agent that can represent them. The Kirti agent, I should be able to talk to it, ask, about your resume, why you left this job, what do you like, et cetera, et cetera. And then, the last component is, and maybe making some AI simulations around tough conversation. The hardest parts of all of our jobs. If you have to have a performance review conversation, either on the giving end or the receiving end, how do you do that well? And the AI can give you feedback. How do you sell? Selling is a super important skill that is not taught anywhere, and it just we kind of feel some people either have it or don't. And what's exciting about AI is, even text-based, we can start to run some of these simulations and it can be conversational. But I think in the next 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to be able to, try to sell to an AI um, agent or kind of like we're having a conversation. It'll full simulation. It'll be able to give you feedback on how you could improve that, or we'll be able to interview or get interviewed by it. And so I think those are kind of the three components. And I think if someone has all of those components, I think they're going to be about as qualified as anyone for these generalist knowledge worker jobs at a junior to mid level.
The other aspect that I wanted to touch upon is, so of course, there's two aspects to how you perhaps use AI at Khan Academy yourself, right? One is, of course, use of AI in educating students better. But also, the other aspect would be using AI to run Khan Academy better, right? So, would you speak to that? Like, how have you gained efficiencies through the use of AI in Khan Academy? And for example, content creation is definitely one aspect. There's companies out there, for example, Duolingo, who claim to have doubled their content in just about a year. And as a benchmark, it took them 12 years to go from zero to 100 courses right when they started, right? And this is all thanks to so many tools out there which use Gen AI very powerfully to create content, multilingual content, and multimodal content. Adobe also has a product to that effect, which is Adobe Captivate, which is more and more AI first now. So can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as you can imagine, with large language models, things related to language are where they're the most robust. And so, it's not surprising to hear those stats from Duolingo. We have definitely, in our localization work, Khan Academy exists in 50 different languages, and we've always had tooling for the volunteers in those regions to be able to localize it. But now the first pass is done by an AI, and then which isn't even there, it isn't perfect. The experts have to kind of comb through it and say, well, that's not the right word. It's a different word for that menu on or something like that. But it definitely has improved our productivity there. In our general content creation, a lot of our resources go in creating practice items. That's where we've seen the AI isn't quite ready yet. It will still make a lot of errors when creating math problems or science problems, especially if there's visualizations. Obviously, the AIs can create visuals, but they can have a lot of errors in it. But we're working on it. We definitely have some in-house tooling where and also AIs have trouble mapping it to the standard. So we might have the human content creator create a first kind of archetype example item and then press a button, and then the AI tries to scale it, and then the human has to go in and like throw half of them away. But it does improve the productivity. So we're doing that. I'll say personally, I still make a ton of videos. So whenever I get a video request, my value add when I make videos is I think my brain naturally goes to a lot of the edge case questions. Like I've had to make some financial literacy videos lately, and I'm like, wait, but what if someone wants to take this part of their 401k? They just turned 55 and they don't want to be whatever the permutation. And in the past, if you do a web search, it would be very hard to find that edge case. But now with AI, you can start to really dig deeper. And then of course I would validate it. If I'm like, okay, I think this is what's going on. Let me double check this. And that's helped me making videos. Sometimes if I just want to make it a little bit more interesting, I'll produce an image. I think it is nice to have written voice and an image. So I think that's all been very helpful. And most organizations, there's just a lot of writing involved. One of my I guess my value adds. I'm always having conversations with people. I was talking to a senior government official in the Middle East about using Khan Academy in their country at a nationwide scale. Got off the phone call and I'm like, okay, let me write them a proposal. In the past, it would have taken, I would have probably taken at least half a day to write that properly. But now I was able to, in theory, I could have taken the transcript of our call and thrown it into the model. But, with a quick, hey, this is what I want to do, blah, 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 blah. First draft. Oh, well, actually, we want to do this. And then I'm editing it. Within half an hour, I had a pretty good draft. And then I was able to share it with all the stakeholders within Khan Academy for them to quickly. So our turnaround time has gone down dramatically. So, those are just our engineering team is obviously, and we've been having conversations. I think some people are talking about 200, 300% improvements in productivity. Some people very little. It might be what their roles are. It might be their mindset towards it. So it's still early days, but I think it's already helping a lot. I'm noticing it a
It's
lot directly
significant.
in my life.
Yeah, it's significant for sure. And even ideas generation is
Hmm.
one area where I've personally found it to be useful because it, of course, if you don't always feed your considerations or limitations, it then comes up with certain ideas which you probably hadn't thought about, right? And then it gives you a starting point where you can pull back on the scope and still adapt some of those so for sure. Okay,
Oh yeah,
Sal,
now I
coming
would say it's
back
like
to
see, and even some of this research that, in the past you'd have a junior person like go and spend a week doing a research report. Yeah, I mean, some of these deep research tools, they go away for 10 minutes and they will give you actually very strong analysis of a
Not,
market or an industry.
yes, they are not bad at all. Absolutely.
Yeah.
To stay a little bit on corporate learning, Sal, there are certainly commonalities between how we learn as students and how we learn as professionals, right? And you've talked about it in your book, and you talk about it a lot. It's about dialogue, not just delivery, right? That back and forth helps in learning, retaining, applying, and everything. So, do you think adults crave that kind of conversational learning as well, or do you think the appetite for that goes away when we step into the workforce?
Oh yeah, I think if you just do a few modules and finish them, you can learn a thing or two, but it's not going to really stick. Um, and I remember when I went to business school, it was all case based and it was all talking. And I remember, my original background undergrad was an engineer, and I remember at first I was like, oh, this is lightweight stuff. There's like no math. We're just talking about stuff. But now, 20, 30 years later, I remember a lot more from those conversational business school experiences. I can't even tell you most of the classes I took in undergrad, much less what happened in them. As human beings, we naturally conversation, being immersed in things, simulations, um, experiential learning, these stick with you. So yes, it is. There are certain places where the video and exercises, that's a lot of what Khan Academy does, can be very useful, but it only will stick when you also experience it, and you have conversations about it, and in some cases you have to teach it to other people. Then it's really going to stick, and you're going to build other skills.
Mhm, mhm. And some of it is also being made possible with AI. So, for example, you're already doing that through Khanmigo, but on the corporate side, Adobe product that I take care of, which is Adobe Learning Manager, we've created a learner's interface where they can interface with that conversational bot, which is in turn then powered by GenAI, which is limited to what your corporate learning paradigm is, with those guardrails against hallucination and your proprietary company knowledge. So I think that takes care of that just in time learning, or what we call micro learning. I think it's just the next frontier for making that in the moment learning possible. Mhm. Okay, you alluded to this late, just about earlier, coaching, right? So, a coach who is invested in your success, is knows you well and will stick around for the journey. I think they can multiply your performance manifold, right? And not all of us are lucky enough to get coaches who are that invested in life. So, with I think AI coaches are making an entry through learning management platforms in corporate. Uh, can you talk a little bit about that? Where do you think, in practical terms, where do you think what kind of skills coaching will be would hypothetically be beneficial in corporate learning?
Yeah, to your point, the AI. I mean, even that micro learning. You're in a meeting and someone says an acronym. You're like, "What are they talking about?" We're oftentimes embarrassed to ask. Well, now you can get a little micro learning, and it'll explain it, and especially if it has your corporation's context, it can tell you the history of why that metric matters, or why they changed it from some other metric, or whatever else. But the mentorship, I feel like I've seen people come into an organization at a junior, at a mid level, and they're great, but they're just making a few mistakes that, and some of them might be getting advice that works in other organizations, but in this organization, it's a little bit different, or whatever else. And I think that's where mentoring can be really valuable. Obviously, the AI it's just in time. You don't have to be embarrassed. You can ask it anything you want. So I think that's very powerful. But I do think in this AI time period, it is interesting to think about how we can also create some maybe peer-based human systems too. Things that in theory we could have done 20 years ago, but we still haven't. And so, some like things like schoolhouse.world, where right now we're using it for peer-based tutoring and dialogue, and it's mostly high school and college students. We are having conversations. I'd like to love to chat with y'all of how could you use these types of peer-to-peer platforms for the workplace where, and it's a win-win on both sides, right? Let's say that I'm a director of marketing, and as part of my professional development, my manager, my vice president tells me, hey, Sal, I would love to see you mentor other people. I would love you. So then I could go on the platform like Schoolhouse and I say, okay, I'm going to run a boot camp on analytical marketing. And then people are going to sign up for it. And then I'm going to, after they do it, they're going to have I'm going to get a reputation score. Sal's a great, I wish I was in his team and things like that. And that's kind of a very strong signal of one, subject matter depth, um, ability to lead, mentorship. It builds cross functional bonds within the organization. So I think things like that could also be very powerful.
Which brings me to my next question, actually. So you've said, I think future belongs to people who can really double down on their core human skills, which you're calling communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and I think the ability to constantly learn, right? So these very soft, fuzzy skills, which could depend human to human, do you think AI could aid in teaching that? I know you just said peer to peer, human to human, but do you think AI could have a role in teaching us that, or its role is just to free up more time to learn these skills?
Oh, I think so. Shameless plug for my book back there, but there's a chapter
Yeah.
about this and job interviews and assessments of the future. And um, right now, if you look at someone's college transcript or their standardized test scores, you have no idea how creative they are. You have no idea how funny they are, how charming they are, whether they're good salespeople, whether they are how they deal with conflict. You have no idea. Um, I do think you're going to be able to create assessments where um, the AI can ask you to give a speech, ask you to sell it something, and it'll be able to give you feedback. So it's not just assessment; it can give you practice. Say, hey, make more eye contact, smile more. You seem too serious. Comb your hair. Whatever. I. I don't think that that's outlandish. I think you could probably prototype some of those things right now with the existing models. So, there's some work to make it super robust, especially if you're going to use it for things like assessment or job placement. But I think for practice, absolutely, feedback on your communication style, your body language, sense of humor, professional etiquette. I think that you could do that today
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is a capability that we're building in our platform. So learning manager, where we're saying, okay, you've done this course and now you want to be certain that you have everything that you needed from this course. So you can interface with a AI coach and they will understand you, whatever you're saying, their comprehension on things is amazing. And they also will take cues on how you're framing your sentences, if you're using too many filler words, eye contact, all of the things that you said. So that is sort of
Yeah, I mean, I would love. It's interesting. I think you could, I mean, this is a little bit creepy, but I'm just thinking of this off the fly. But like, you could imagine putting a camera in a room where, these days we have a lot of our meetings on video conference. Just based on that, you throw that into an AI and it can give every participant in that meeting feedback on what they did well, what they could do better.
that'd be amazing. Yeah. Great. I think we're at the last question, Sal. What advice, what quick wins would you ask learning and development professionals to seek in their work with AI? Anybody who's just getting started or who's unsure, how to make an impact with AI, what would you advise them to start with?
Yeah, I would say this is a good time to just a lot of the pattern we typically do with technology is whatever the workflow we used to do, can we replace parts of it? And that can make some progress, but I think this is always a good time where you just take a step back and say, what were we trying to solve in the first place? Um, and then on a first principles try to solve it. And I think just getting started makes a huge difference. I've been telling this to a lot of professors where I was like, okay, yes, AI can be used to cheat on your writing assignment. And by the way, yes, your students are cheating. Now, before we even think about how to police that cheating or how to change that, let's think about why you're even assigning those writing assignments in the first place. Because there's different reasons, and let's optimize around that. So I think that's the first thing to think about. And then, yeah, just get started and don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Be careful about some of these tools being used as an assessment tool just yet, but I think they absolutely can be very powerful practicing tools, mentorship tools, development tools, and probably in the not too far future, assessment tools too. I always say it's not going to be perfect. Nothing is bias free, but humans are incredibly biased. So it just has to be better than the
Yes,
humans.
that's a great point. All right. Thank you so much, Sal. This has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing all your insights with us.